Guess it's 12. Okay. All right. Should we get started then? Just making you start recording?
Yeah, or you're all set.
Okay, so it's 12 o'clock. So we're going to get started. Thanks for everyone for joining us today. Um, so I am your host, Latifa Pelshay Ahmed of ALCLA Native Plants. Megan is here as well in case who is our horticulturist who will help also answer any questions where relevant, where she can bring her expertise in. We are a native plant nursery founded in 1992 and are now based in Carstairs in Treaty 7 territory, which has been stewarded for generations by the people of the Siksikaitsitapi, the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina, and the Iari Nakota First Nations. We are located in Métis District 4, governed by the Otipemisiwak Métis government of Alberta. So welcome to the Native Plant Lunch Hour Q&A series. Today's Q&A series will discuss establishing native plants. Please be aware that this webinar is being recorded. And I'm just going to start with some key definitions so we're on the same page. So native plants are those plants that have been on the landscape for thousands of years. They have adapted with local wildlife, including pollinators and native birds. And these specific relationships have evolved over thousands of years and that and have enabled so these relationships have evolved over long periods of time and often rely on specific native plants to survive. In North America, native plants, sorry, I was up late last night. I was in a workshop, so sorry, folks, my brain's just catching up with me here still. In North America, plants native to the landscape prior to European colonization are considered native. In terms of plant establishment, that is when plants transition from being newly seeded or transplanted to becoming fully rooted, self-sustaining, and actively growing in a new environment. During establishment, a plant develops a strong functional root system. They may build relationships and connections with soil microbes and mycorrhizal fungi. They adjust to site conditions such as moisture, temperature, light, and wind, and they begin to have consistent above ground growth. Also, establishment plants can start flowering. Depending on the plant, it can be multiple years. So some plants need to be established before flowering occurs and seed production, which is a very energy intensive process for a plant. And keep in mind that for native plants, root development can be more energy goes into that often before top growth, especially for perennials. And typically, one growing season is required for fast establishing species, and up to 3 years for many perennials, and sometimes longer for more, for example, monocot like lilies or whatever. And establishment could be longer in dry or challenging sites. Once established, a plant no longer requires supplemental watering and can compete more effectively with weeds and better withstand environmental stress. So I'm going to start just by answering some of the questions that came in on the online question form. And just for folks to know, you can go ahead and submit questions in advance to any of the Q&As, and whatever, I pull out the questions most relevant to the topic, and those will be the questions covered first, and then I'll accept questions from the audience. And just to clarify, this webinar, we do list it until 12:30, but the previous webinars, there's been so many questions, we have gone until 12:45 and sometimes 1 p.m. So just letting you know, if you have to leave at 12:30, I understand, but we don't mind spending a bit of extra time to answer your questions, and you will receive a recording later. So if you want to, if you missed anything, you can follow up that way. So the first question I received that was relevant to the question: I have a bed that gets little to no sun in the morning and scorching west sun from about 1 to 6 p.m. It's right against my dark gray garage, so it gets quite warm there. Can you suggest plants that will work there? When I plant tall plants like common sunflower, they stretch far out to get light, and I want to avoid that. So in that case, my suggestion, that would be part shade. So it's between 6 and 4 hours of sunlight. So my suggestion would be a plant that prefers part shade. Now I do recommend our online database at alclanativeplants.com to search for all the part shade options, because it's hard for me to pull it out all on the top of my head. But certainly, what's coming to my mind, like columbines are easy, love part shade, showy Jacob's ladder. Megan, is there anything coming to your mind that you think would do well in that kind of site?
Yeah, Thalictrum or Shoyaster maybe.
So the Electrum is veiny meadow rue for anyone who doesn't know that one. And yeah, great idea, the showy aster. So there's lots of possibilities, but I would choose something suitable for part shade and dry. Sounds like it's quite a dry site. And I do wonder if there's an overhang on the garage. I'm not sure, that wasn't clear, but you might need to do supplemental water if it's in a rain shadow. So that's another thing to consider, how structures might be affecting access to water if drought is an issue. Okay, next question. So question 2 and 3 are very similar, but so maybe I'll read them. Well, I'll start with the first and then. So I was told I should dig down a foot or so before planting so that I could add 6 inches of mulch around my native plants. Is that really necessary? No, absolutely not. The second question is, I want to create a native plant bed in my front yard. Can you establish native plants in a clay-based soil? And should I put a few inches of mulch on a newly established native plant bed? I was told to put 4 to 6 inches of mulch around my plants. So someone is going around saying you need to put 6 inches of mulch around native plants. I don't know why or who is saying that, but no, that's not necessary. And you can absolutely plant in clay soil. And so in our experience, a lot of these plants are adapted to different soil types. They can manage sandy to clay, and they're quite adaptable, but you can certainly choose tap roots for primarily clay soil. In terms of mulch, you can top dress with mulch. I think that's the right term, Megan, right? Top dressing. I'm drawing on.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Megan, do you want to just go into that a little bit about the mulching issue? Like, you're so good at that too. Like, where's the?
Yeah, for sure. I would say, I mean, what the purpose of mulch, if you're adding it to soil, would be to add organic material. And I don't think that that doesn't make sense, because all you're doing is creating a pocket where the soil will be different in that one pocket, and then it's changing outside of that pocket. So if you use it as a top, it for retaining moisture and reducing seed or weed seeds, right? It's not for changing the soil or amending the soil. It doesn't make sense, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, so you can definitely, as Megan said, add for. I wouldn't put mulch directly on top of your native plants or very close, because it can actually suppress the growth of plants, right? It actually functions that way. So it's going to bury your plants. So if you want to have mulch, give some space to your native plant. You can put mulch around, and that's for weed suppression and maybe moisture retention, but it's not to help the establishment of your plant. Is that right, Megan? Is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that covers it.
Yeah, so definitely don't, it's not necessary, and don't use, as Megan said, don't use mulch as an amendment. You probably, your plants won't do well at all, I think, in that situation. So yeah, and nor is it necessary, right? So if you don't want to use mulch, it just means that you may have to do some weeding while your plants establish. Question 4, we have a cottage on Buffalo Lake near Stettler, but have a problem getting anything to grow. It's all pasture land. Thoughts? We get lots of bees, grasshoppers, dragonflies, but we have been unsuccessful with bee balm. Lupins don't grow, liatris doesn't, hennin chicks doesn't spread. So just to clarify, I mean, hennin chicks isn't a native species, but there are native sedums you can use, although Stettler wouldn't be their native range. They're more of a foothill species. So if you're having trouble growing species, well, first of all, just try to, think about plants that were historically in your area, but in the case, bee balm would be historically in the area. So I'm not totally sure why you're struggling. Have you tried with live plants or from seed? And have you just been broadcasting seed, or have you been actually preparing beds? So I would need a little bit more information to understand why you're having challenges. There's no reason why you can't establish Monarda in the wild in that area, but if you're just broadcasting seed, that's not the most effective method, and there could be lots of reasons why that they're not coming up, right? There's also competition from invasive grasses, especially on pasture land, and pretty much everywhere. So you might want to have to start with plugs or start special localized areas where you can establish the plants and then get them to spread. I don't think it's that they won't grow, it's that really trying to troubleshoot that. Yeah, anything you want to add to that, Megan, on that subject?
Yeah, maybe like if it's pasture land, that seems like it would be a pretty competitive landscape. So just sticking something in and hoping for the best probably isn't the best strategy. You'd have to probably take some stuff out, right?
Yeah, yeah. So you might want to make like some small sections where you decide, okay, I want to establish the name of the plant, remove if there's an invasive species there, like pull them out, create a little area, for example, establish them, and then once they're established, you can sort of let them compete. Could be one strategy. So yeah, there could be multiple ways to look at that. But that's a really good point, though, when we think about establishment, is considering what's already existing on the site. And it is very challenging for new plants or baby plants to compete with already established plants, especially plants that might be very aggressive. And there's going to be an impact on the landscape from years of cattle grazing. There's going to be probably very competitive and aggressive species that have been selected for by grazing itself, because there's a feedback loop, right? So you might, maybe there's, I don't know what you're dealing with. Maybe there's buckbrush, that's a common one after grazing, or pussy toes, or certain grasses. So you really need to consider place a plant, like you have to make space for a new plant. So yeah, hopefully that helps. But if you need more help, you can have a consultation with Megan now, is doing these to support folks and finding a strategy that fits their goals and budget, so we can really tease apart the different issues and figure out ways to achieve your goals. And another, yeah, so I'll leave it at that for now. And then last question, what are some underappreciated or underlooked species that you think should be included in more urban suburban gardens, i.e. not Giardia, giant hyssop, coneflowers, or liatris? So those are common ones, and certainly relatives of those can be found at large scale greenhouses and nurseries. So there's so many options. The first thing that came to my head was like broomweed. That's a very cute one. The sweet vetches, heterocerums, are very sweet. Basically anything that is historically native to the area. We've been so impressed with our yellow paintbrushes, how well they've done. They're native to the Calgary area. I'm not sure this is from Calgary, but that just came to my mind. But depending on where your area is, so if you're from a different region, look at plants that are common or historically on the landscape, and you don't have to do those, but that's it is a positive way to support the ecosystem, is to think about that. Obviously, native grasses. I love the giant wild rye. We talked about that one of the recent online workshops we did. So any plants, Megan, that you think, I know you have some in your mind.
I mean, I always loved some gumweed in there. Gumweed's probably one of my favorites. What else can I think about? I mean, and I do like the heterocerum. She's probably one of my favorite I have in my garden right now.
So yeah, there's like lomatium, so biscuit roots. Those are so cool. There's just there's just so many cool plants. Like, again, take a look at our database, take a look at our online store. I'm going to be launching the plugs pretty soon online, and we're bringing in new plants. We're going to have the balsam root this year, which is so gorgeous. My goodness. So I think we'll be able to sell some because we have so many. Right, Megan? I think we have what, a tray or more?
Yeah, one tray going so far.
So I think it's more than we can. Well, we'll see. We've been planting them as well. They're just so gorgeous. So if not this year, then following years we'll have the balsam root. But yeah, there's a lot of possibilities. The thalictrum, the meadow ruse, people don't go for them because they don't have showy flowers, but they're just such tough. They can do shade to full sun, dry to moist. They're just such tough guys, and they have such beautiful showy fern-like foliage. So some people don't go for the foliage, they always want the most showy flowers. Baneberries are really great, shade, dry shade plants. So anyways, there's so many. Just like look at what you haven't seen before that looks new and try that. There's just so many. Most people aren't growing most of these plants, so there's a lot to choose from. All right, so that's I'll now move on to audience questions. So Megan, has there been stuff coming up in the chat?
Not too much, but I do have something here. How variable is establishment times for different species, and how can you tell once a species is established?
So there, overall, the rule of like 3 years is pretty works for most perennials. Annuals obviously are very different, so they're gonna die off in a single season. So they're just gonna not put a lot of energy into roots and a lot into top growth. So in a way, they establish very, very quickly, but they're short-lived. Same with the short-lived perennials or biennials, like they establish very quickly. And so, probably even after 1 month, you don't really need to add supplemental water. They're really tough and vigorous because they're designed to grow fast and produce flowers and then seeds quickly, versus some of the perennials. Some are like the Rudbeckia, like a brown-eyed or black-eyed Susan. Those establish quite quickly, I find. Whereas some of, say, an oak Perry's oat grass or some of those grasses take a little bit longer. They definitely need the 3-year mark to really show anything. Something like a shooting star, 2 years. Year one, there is only one leaf. And same with Liatris. So like there are certain plants year one, they don't really do anything. Same with prairie crocus, just like 1 or 2 leaves. So a plant is established when they start to produce whorls of leaves, when they start to flower. That's a really good sign. And then size wise, like the aerial growth is proportional to root size for perennials. So once they really start to fill in, and we have some photos online, and I'm going to be doing some more like showing the transition of our garden over time, but just to show what it looks like for people. Year one, plants are really small. Year two, you're already impressed, but by year three, you're like blown away. Well, that's really an established plant. But by year two, you already don't really need to water that plant. Megan, is there anything you want to add on to that question?
I don't think so. I think you kind of cover. I mean, it can be, because it's so variable. I think, yeah, having a set time to like keep checking on it is probably like 3 years. But I mean, it really depends on how they're looking. I think some sites need more help. Like if it's really dry or really competitive, you might need to help them for a longer period of time than if you have a nice garden bed.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And then there's definitely some more challenging species, especially monocotyledons. So monocotyledons are like lilies, irises, grasses, and onions. Now, some of those in that category go fast and some are really slow. So like a wood lily, which we've been working on for years, trying to get plants for people, but they're so hard to grow from seed. They take forever, years, and then they take like years, maybe 7 years or more to flower. Same with the white camas. Probably not going to get, maybe year three you'll get flowers, but it could be longer. So onions are pretty quick, but for it to get a dense patch does take some time. Some grasses are fast, some like the prairies oat grass, like that's probably our slowest grass in our garden bed. Like they've just been like growing roots so hard for 2 years now, these little tufts. I'm excited for them to actually take off and have some aerial growth. So irises I find are a little bit more fast growing than the lily family. So just it really just depends. Some of them, and then taproots as well can have their own uh, challenges. I think taproots can be a little bit harder to establish because they don't like being moved around, and if you damage them, then they can't really recover very well from that. Sometimes, a lot of the time, yeah. And then that's a big concern with conservation. Like uh, this very slight digression, but I was chatting with someone about the native plant rescues, and like, yeah, there's a lot of things you can rescue, but taprooted plants you can't, and that's why we do need to conserve and protect these areas. Like you can't. Well, also like ripping out all the plants from a landscape does not reproduce that landscape. We still lose it. But yeah, so it's just things to think about there. Okay, let's move to the next question.
Yeah, so next question says, our local club has established native shrubs, and we've been weed whacking, encroaching plants that threaten to crowd them out and watering them. How do we wean them off of this pampered existence?
How do you wean them off? Well, it'd be good to know like which species and why that they're needing so much additional care. Um, how, sorry, did it say how long this has been going on for, Megan?
No, it does not.
Okay, so I mean, typically we say like after one season, you don't need to do anything more. The exception would be, as Megan said, if it's a really tough site, or maybe there's like a structure blocking moisture access, or competition from a tree can also cause issues. It can take longer to establish when a tree in a dry site is like sucking all the water up and there's not enough to share. Now that plant can compete, but it's not getting the growing as fast because of competition from the tree, so it needs more support. So honestly, if it's been a full season, I would just pull back, do less pampered, to see what happens, and it's really, you are in a relationship here with these plants, so look for signs of any kind of stress, which could be in the sign of wilting leaves or insect damage, and excess insect damage. Of course, we want to have native caterpillars and insects utilizing our plants. That's a big reason we want native plants, is we're supporting the ecological web of life. But yeah, excess damage, tons of aphids, for example, are signs of stress. Is there anything you want to add to that, Megan?
Yeah, sorry, there's a bit of a follow-up. This person is saying that this site has been going on for several years, and there's also deer browsing there.
Okay, so I guess competition from deer can be tough. You might want a barrier, which there can be a physical barrier or could be a scent barrier. So deer don't really like certain smells. So it could be predator urine or hair clippings from a dog or human. Like, you could go to the hairdresser, save your hair clippings. These kind of scents will be a deterrent. You could also create deterrents with plants they don't like sage, for example, like really smelly plants, yarrow, onions or whatever, could create a barrier, or those are possible strategies. So if it's animal competition, like, you're creating a really wonderful environment and an inviting tasting meal for them, so it's hard for them to resist. So then I probably, that obviously that's contributing to why on your end.
No, I think that's pretty good. Do you want the next
Sure,
question?
sure.
Yeah, someone's asking that they're saying they have showy asters and they need to be moved. How easy are they to move?
They have a fibrous root. It's not a taproot, so they should transplant pretty well. Get as much root as you can. Remember, a transplanted plant will have transplant shock, meaning they're not going to be actively, they're going to take time to settle into their new place. They have to reestablish, regrow their roots, and the aerial growth may now be out of proportion to the size of the root. So you might get you probably get a stopping of of aerial root growth or a decline in that aerial root growth. It's also good to transplant in the spring and or fall. So like that's a fall flowering plant. So definitely, ideally transplant them well before their flower. And you may even want to cut off the flower this year just to keep that energy going into root production, because as soon as something goes to flower, sometimes we've lost plants. I've lost plants where they weren't fully established and I let them flower and they put way too much energy into their seeds and then they die. Some plants take that like that strategy that there's it's just like, this is my last chance to produce babies, so I'm going to take it and put all my energy into it and die because they're worried, that they're really stressed out. So that could be an option, like it could be a possibility. And yeah, just keep watering them, and then, but you shouldn't, other than that, you shouldn't have any issues. And anything you want to add to that, Megan?
No, I would just say that also, like, I would treat a newly transplanted plant kind of like a new plant. So like keep up that watering and, make sure it's a cool day when you're moving her too.
Yes, very good point. Yeah. Don't let those roots get all dried up and sun baked. That would be very bad. Yeah, I was kind of thinking about how like when you expose the plants or roots, it's private area. So you should have the same, treat the roots as the same dignity and regard as you would like private areas of a creature. Like it's something that isn't usually exposed, so it should be treated with a lot of delicateness and respect. This is kind of something I was imagining when I was transplanting some seeds the other day.
I like that. We've got another question here. Can I get rid of my common nettle and grow stinging nettle? By seed or plugs is better.
Yeah, so either would be fine. So if you have the Urtica dioica, the stinging nettle, because it's a rhizomatous plant, it might take time to eradicate them if you're trying to do that. So like again, a rhizome left in the ground might regenerate a new plant. So you might want to work on fully removing that one first before investing in the new plant, because it will probably be very confusing to try and tell them apart, because this native slender nettle, Urtica gracilis, can have broader leaves as well. And I do find that when they're young, they have broader leaves. And as they get older, the leaves take on that slender characteristic. And then from seed, as sometimes like, again, I think they need that bit of cold stratification. So in my experience, sometimes I've had them germinate really well and sometimes less so. And I really think it's just the temperature and the time when we sowed it. Same seed lot, like there's no reason why it shouldn't perform. But so the seed is generally easy, but it can be challenging as well, and if the conditions are not perfect. And then they're very small seeds, so I would surface sow them. I wouldn't bury them too deeply. And then also we expect to have plugs available. We haven't sown nettle this year just because it hasn't been the most popular plant, so we're kind of holding off on whether we're going to grow a lot more. We do have some overwintered ones, so unfortunately, yeah, I know I've been promoting nettle a lot as a butterfly magnet and as a wonderful food and medicine and fiber bearing plant for folks who attended the workshop last night. That's why I'm sleepy, because we did a late into the evening and and with all the weather and everything, and I was driving. But yeah, so where was I going with that? Yeah, anyways, it slipped out of my mind. But yeah, so with the plants, it probably is, if you're struggling with the seed, just go with a plug, honestly. Like it's a one, even if you just I would get a couple, because it's a dioecious plant, so you need a male and a female to produce seeds. When they're young, we don't always know what gender they are, if you will, so get a couple and then throw them in. It is always easier to put in a pre-established plant in a way than growing from seed, unless you don't mind putting the extra time and energy in. What do you think, Megan?
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I mean, I would say again, it depends on the area. I think if you have an established bed, seed is going to be easier than if it's just somewhere. Whereas a plant is a little less work because you guarantee something right away.
Exactly. It's 12:29, so I'm just going to do a few announcements, and then if there's additional questions, or how many questions more are there, Megan?
There's probably about 8 to 10 questions more.
My goodness. Okay, so I'm going to do a couple announcements for folks that need to go right away, and then I'll continue on with the questions. So the same announcement as we had previously, we do have an ongoing discount for new newsletter subscribers. You get $10 off orders of a minimum of $100. So all you have to do is sign up to the newsletter on our website, alclanativeplants.com. Our next online workshop, which will be not a Q&A, but just like a proper with a PowerPoint presentation, will be about starting native plants from seed, which is next Wednesday, February 25th, from 7 to 8:30 p.m. So this is a ticketed event, but it is sliding scale. So there's, for whoever needs support, then you can choose a lower price ticket. So it's meant to be accessible to as many different people as possible. And this will really go into a deep dive into seed collection, cleaning, storage, and germination techniques. We'll really focus on stratification, scarification. There'll be lots of examples, photos. I'll talk about different plants and the strategies to germinate those seeds. So from easy to germinate to more challenging. We'll cover a broad range. So that will be next week. And again, there'll be a recording. If you can't attend, please feel free to sign up and then you'll receive the recording later. There's also 2 in-person events coming up. We're doing a workshop with Contemporary Calgary, an art gallery in Calgary, as part of a art piece, Seeds for Grassy Mountain. That was a collaboration with myself and artist Alana Bartol. That will be on February 28th, which is a Saturday from 2 to 4 p.m. The cost is $10 and includes admission to the gallery. And so this will include, we'll be scarifying lupins. So you'll learn how to scarify lupin seeds and get hands-on experience, which is a species endemic to the Rocky Mountains and endemic to where Grassy Mountain is. So this is, again, in response to the coal mining proposed in the Eastern Slopes. And yes, and then there'll be a drawing component run by Alana. So she'll be doing milk drawings. So you get to make like a transparent. All ages are welcome. So if you've got kids, please do join. There's still spaces available. The next free Q&A event will be native plant bed preparation on March 18th. That's also a Wednesday at noon. So that's my last announcement. All right, we'll continue on with questions.
All right, so this person's asking for a recommendation. Are there annual pollinator-friendly native flowers or flowers that bloom in the first year?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a number of annuals. There's annual sunflower. We've got Rocky Mountain bee plant, which is one of my favorites. And a lot of these will self-seed. I really like, yellow monkey flower is really lovely, but they are native to a riparian site. So if it's very dry, they may not self-seed or come back. But if it's a moist area, or if it's in a pot, or if you're irrigating, they're more likely to come back because they do like that moisture. But they're a beautiful plant. They've got a nice big like yellow snapdragon like flower. The pink monkey flowers will also bloom in the first year. I find Rudbeckia will. Some of the grasses like little Bouteloua, so blue grandma grass is one I've seen bloom in the first year. I think I mentioned Rudbeckia already. Polemonium mite, so that's the showy Jacob's ladder. Anything coming to your mind, Megan, blooming first year?
I mean, some of the biennials will bloom the first year if they're really happy, but I'm trying to think. I mean, like the dietaria, I think, bloom the first year, and the plugs, right?
Yeah, so that's the hoary aster. That's a great pollinator plant. It's a biennial to short-lived perennial, but boy, that produces a lot of blooms. It's incredible.
Yeah, I can't think of any others. But
Coreopsis, like the golden tick seed, we're gonna have some plants this year. Finally, it took like 2 or 3 years in stratification to get them to do anything, but they're doing something. Those are wonderful, but I think they do bloom a little bit in the first year, and then they'll come back and bloom more the next year. Those are so beautiful because they just like they're so unassuming, and then all of a sudden they're like, phew, they're like 5 feet across, and it's August and they're blooming everywhere, and it's just so nice to get that late season color. Obviously, yellow evening primrose. So biennial, like I do recommend incorporating gumweed, as Megan mentioned earlier too. So incorporating annuals and biennials in your, especially for a new planting, so you get a lot of size and color early on. It feels rewarding and it helps you be patient for your perennials for sure. Okay, let's do the next question then.
Yeah, can you provide tips for stratifying native seeds? Should I just place them outside in a tray?
Yeah, so you can certainly just sow them directly outside, either on the ground or in pots, which can be easier because the seed is germination often is staggered over time. And just in terms of being able to figure out what is your native plant seedling, what is a weed seedling, it can be easier to just start in a pot, but you can certainly start directly on the ground. So fall planting or early spring up until probably early May, I would say. We find in our experience, like the germination after May really is starting to taper off. I mean, ideally, even April is best. So yeah, outside is great, and or in the fridge, right? So we do artificially in the fridge because we really need to capture every single germinant, and that's just how we operate and grow the plants. So that's another option too. And you can do it either in sand, we use silica sand, or you could directly put peat in the fridge and grow into that as well. There's other options. Okay, next question, I guess.
All right. I'm teaching myself how to garden and I want a full native garden. I got some pink monkey flower from you last year with a note saying they liked a little wetter environment, but I accidentally drowned them. How do I maintain the right environment for plants like that?
So for a plant like that, I mean, in one way, the easiest thing is to try to, rather than try to, if a plant isn't doing well in a site, I would try instead, rather than trying to make a site suitable for the plant, I would try and find a plant suitable for that site. And that's my personal opinion, there is a trial and error that goes. Again, that's why I always draw on what was historically in your region, because those are fail safe. Like they've been there for thousands and thousands of years, and you know that they can withstand the Chinooks, the hail, the climate, the dryness, the soil types as well, the different types of, you know, soil that you find. I know there's different microclimates, but generally in an urban lot, there's so much plasticity with how these plants grow. We don't worry too much about it. Um, Certainly in nature though, you'll see certain populations in certain preferring certain types of soil types. That's true. But yeah, so I would say like if it if it's too much moisture, choose a plant that can handle some flooding. Like we had the and we if they survive, we'll have them in the spring. The wild parsnip. What's the name, Megan? It was a different name. Water parsnip. Water parsnip. CM suave. I'm so excited. So that's a plant that like loves being drowned because they grow in water, but can then a lot of these ephemeral wetland or like prairie wets places that grow in wet sites and prairies can handle drying out because there's seasonal drying out. So they're really cool plants that can handle like a lot of moist and flooding, and then also really dry. So if the pink, which the pink ones grow along stream beds, so they can handle quite a bit of water, but if they're not performing well and you're struggling, I would just, you could maybe reserve those for like a pot or a changing bed that you change out. You know, keep your seeds, keep bringing them back year after year if you really like them, because I know the pinks are so pretty and so attractive, but at the same time it's easier to choose a plant that's for the right site. Anything you want to add to that, Megan?
Just that also, like if you're just learning how to garden, there's always going to be some growing pains. Like you're not always going to get things perfect the first time. And a lot of it is just kind of figuring out what works and what doesn't work. So yeah, I definitely agree that picking plants for a site is the easier method. But there's always going to be some failures. It's not always a failure on your part. There's environmental factors. There's one hot day. There's one, so it's a learning process. You don't expect everything to be work out all the time.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. Thanks, Megan. All right, let's do the next one.
Absolutely. So we are on an acreage and would like to seed our septic area with grasses and then forb plugs. How would we prepare the area before seeding this spring?
So, if it's just bare soil, you could really just seed right into it. Like, you can, if you are concerned about there being weed seeds in there, you can solarize it. So using clear plastic in the warmer part of the season, but then you're going to lose that seeding window, which is the spring, right? So I might suggest, well, there's a few approaches you could take. You might want to do, you were saying wildflower plugs, right, Megan? That was what they were saying.
Yeah, they want to seed with grasses and then add forbs later.
Okay, add forbs later. It might be easier to put the forbs in and seed almost at the same time, because once the grasses are bigger and more established, they'll be more competitive with the forbs. I do recommend trying to do your forbs first so that they take up some space, because I do find grasses, especially if you're seeding, they become dense, you may need to thin them out around some of your forbs to give them a bit more space. They can be a little bit more competitive. If you get really good germination on your seed, then there could be an issue. And or we do have stuff like the City of Calgary reclamation mix, which has a mix of mostly grass but some forb seed. And we had feedback from a client who did seed a couple of years ago. The first year it was very dry and they didn't get good germination, but then the second year, with this last year, with all the water we had in the spring, it just all came up. So that was a big learning experience for them to think about. But I think they seeded late spring. So regardless, it could still take time for those seeds to all germinate, and might not be the first season. So doing weed maintenance in that first year. So that's an approach. So either choosing a seed mix that has both is my recommendation, or putting in your plugs and seeding together, I think would be easier than getting your grasses already establishing and then trying to squeeze in wildflowers later, unless there's bare patches that have already, which is very common with native grass seeds, that there'll be bare patches, and then you could put plugs into those. So that could be, you just don't know what's going to happen into doing that. That would be different, or anything you want to add?
No, I think that's pretty much what I would say. Unless the area hasn't been prepped in any way, in which case I don't know if you would be able to get it ready for spring seeding, if you have to remove a lot of grass or something. But yeah.
Yeah, so if there's already established non-native grasses, you need to remove those first before. So you could do with a sod cutter is an option, as well as we've used not solarizing, but tarping the area and including light. There's different ways you can approach getting rid of those grasses. Okay, so next question.
All right. We have a green space behind our house that has aggressive grass. The developer would have seeded it, but it's not well maintained. Do you have recommendations for along our chain link fence that will compete with the grass on the other side?
I would, if you're getting rhizomes coming in, I would recommend putting a landscape edging or some kind of barrier, because a fence, it's not from the top that they're coming, it's from underground. So you want to stop, that's where you want the barrier to be, and then you could always weed whack them when they're going to seed or whatever. Make sure that the seeds don't fall into your yard. That would be the other thing. But I find those grasses seem to mainly spread by underground rhizomes. So if you just create a barrier And that could go for whatever plant. If you have a neighbor who doesn't take care of their creeping bellflower, you can put in landscape edging. And we've also done, like Ben has also done, like the air pruning type edging. Is there a proper term for that, Megan? Where you just like create a trench?
Yeah, I've heard it as air pruning as well, so I think that's correct.
Yeah. So, and then because they won't grow into that empty space. And that could give you some flexibility too. Usually like those rhizomes are not deeper than like 4 to 6 inches. I mean, 6 inches that's really deep. I don't think you really just like that top few inches of the soil where those rhizomes are. So for those grasses, so it should be fine at that level. Yeah, like that 6 inch, that's the standard length, isn't it? Depth, it's like 6 inches.
Yeah, I think yeah, it should be 4 to 6.
Yeah, so it should be, that should be, you would agree with that, hey?
Yeah, definitely. I don't know how well trying to establish a plant while you're having rhizomes coming in is going to work out. It would be a lot of weeding. It would be difficult.
Yeah, and then they'll never stop because it's on the other side of the fence. So
exactly.
Yeah.
All right. We have, is it better to keep native plants separate from others, or can you mix them with non-native species? For instance, I have planted a bunch of native perennials, but I also have some annual non-native flowers. Is this the wrong approach?
I guess depends who you ask, like, and what you're trying to achieve, and what are the goals like that you're trying to achieve. So my concern with a lot of these non-native annuals is that we're inadvertently contributing to the development of invasive species. It can take up to 100 years for invasive species to develop. So annuals, non-native annuals, mixes and stuff like that often contain, non-native plants or plants that could potentially become weeds. So anytime, I mean, the reality is we know today that the main source of invasive species is the horticultural industry. And over 65% of invasive species are coming from the horticulture industry. And a paper came out recently by the United Nations on the biodiversity crisis, and invasive species are one of the top 3 drivers of biodiversity loss. So if you're wanting to support biodiversity, I would avoid non-native plants because you don't know the long-term effects that you're contributing to at the end of the day. But if you just want show and you're not really worried about that, then by all means, I can't tell people what to do. It's not like it's illegal. I'm just, for me, and what I've come to see in the landscape and the impact on the environment and the values that I believe in, I'm very rigid. I tend to go only native. I'm not that interested in non-native plants. I think there's a real problem with them on the landscape, and it's a growing problem. It's not a declining problem, and I don't want to contribute to that. And I don't want to give advice that contributes to that. I don't want to pretend that that isn't a problem, and that the industry I'm part of, although we're not contributing to it, but that industry isn't a huge problem globally. I don't want to pretend that that's not the case, just for sales or whatever, or marketing. There's a lot of really beautiful native species that one could choose. I understand there's fewer annual natives. So that being said, if you work with those annuals before and you feel comfortable that they're just going to die off and it's just going to be for a temporary thing, do what you want to do. And again, I'm not gonna judge anyone. I have very strong beliefs on the subject, but there might be a reason why you want to have it, and I respect that too. So you be you, but again, that from the environmental point of view, from the pollinator point of view, you'll support more wildlife, more butterflies, more bees, more hoverflies, more parasitic wasps, and so on, and songbirds if you choose native plants. That's what the data shows and supports. Is there anything you want to add to that, Megan?
No, not really. I would also maybe just say that there are a lot of annual and biannual options in native plants that you can choose to fill in those spaces if you're looking for something year 1, year 2 that you want nice and big as well.
Yeah.
All right, we got 2 more questions here. So our next one is, about creeping bellflower. Any native plants that can outcompete creeping bellflower?
Probably, I would think something like sage, like it's just something that's really strong and spreads in a similar way. So you could try sage. You could try establishing some Myanthemum, so the star-flowered Solomon seal might be a good one. But I would establish a good patch and then like let them go to battle. Uh, maybe milkweed. Like just choose some like aggressive, spreading natives that can like bully the and bigger ones. Like I think milkweed, if it's sunny, would be a good choice because milkweeds are bigger and more aggressive, and they might outcompete. And then you can also just like pick away at your bellflower. It's very hard to get rid of, but you can, if you keep pulling the leaves back, it weakens the rhizome too. So, but I understand that there's huge patches. So, wild strawberry could potentially be, but they're smaller, so they're shorter, so they're not going to be competitive height wise. Anything you can think of, Megan, that might be a nice, strong spreader to compete? Oh, the stiff sunflower might be a good one too.
Oh yeah, she's beefy.
Yeah, I bet that one would really pack a punch. And you'll get some. We've had, what are the yellow? Was it yellow warblers we've had, Megan, eating the sunflower seeds?
Yes.
Oh, they're so cute. So you'll get yellow. You might get yellow warblers too if you put the sunflowers in. Which they're not coming to the creeping bellflowers. So.
That's true. Okay, last question here. It's just a follow-up. The seed starting program is a paid-for event, whether or not you attend the night of. They're just wondering if you can watch the event on YouTube afterwards.
Yes. So if you can attend the seed starting workshop, online workshop, I will send a recording. It'll be the full thing and you won't miss anything. So it's, It's just, I'll have slides and I'll be providing more in-depth information with images and so forth than we do in the Q&As. Is a more informal session.
All right, that was our last one.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for attending, and I really appreciate that you folks coming out and bringing your questions. It's been a really wonderful experience, and I hope to see you folks at the next Q&A. And then we will get a follow-up email with the events that I mentioned, as well as yeah, I think that's it really. And the recording, of course. You can tell my brain's a little sleepy. That's the thing with booking event after event. So forgive me. Thanks for your patience with my brain this morning. And again, just happy planting, everyone. I'm so looking forward to your successful planting projects. Share them with me. And we're just, I'm so grateful to have you all part of my community. You just make my day. So thank you so much. Have a beautiful, beautiful week. And thank you, Megan. My goodness, thanks for sharing your incredible knowledge and helping to host. And just thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
I guess we'll close out.
Yeah.